How do you become a passive real estate investor? Well, it's not going buy the property in your backyard, but here's how you can actually do it. So how can you become a passive real estate investor? And I mean passive, not like the active ones where they're going and slaving away, trying to renovate a property and doing all that kind of stuff, but really more of a hands-off investor. I'm gonna kind of teach you step by step how you can actually make that work for you. All right, so first and foremost, if you want to be a passive real estate investor, it's going to require this. You got to have some of the money, right? The moolah. You got to have the money. There are so many people that teach you to become passive real estate investors, but then you find out you're just setting up a part-time job or even a full-time business to do that. For example, wholesaling, properties, where you try to be the middle person in between the buyer and the seller and then make the profit off that. That is anything but passive. Even if you can train a bunch of team members to do a lot of the work for you, still you're actively managing that business. It is a business that could be more or less residual for you. Same thing on fix and flips, right? Especially if you're the one doing it. Now, even if you hire contractors out, you're probably still being the general contractor on those deals. Or if you hire a general contractor, you might have very little profits to make on those deals and you're still having to actively find the properties. That's not what I'm talking about with being a passive real estate investor. Passive real estate investor requires the money. You got to find the person that is the active investor to put the money with them. Now, this is not a set it and forget it mentality. So many times we've been trained and taught by financial advisors to be lazy with our money, to just set it, forget it, don't even watch it, just let it do its thing and just trust the professionals. That is not what I'm recommending here because you can lose all your money in real estate. It is actually possible. Now, it's harder to do than even in the stock market, but it can actually happen if you're not careful, especially if you're not careful with who you're investing with. So first and foremost, when you're looking to do investments, number one is get educated. Understand where the different types of investments out there. Understand that there are passive investments like turnkey real estate, which is different than actively managing your real estate. Now you could actively manage it, but turnkey will allow you to have property managers do it for you. In fact, they'll help you find the property, they'll help you get the financing for it, they'll then get the renters for you, they'll do everything. You just have to buy the property and then sign off on it, and then they take their property management fees. They often will also make money on the sale of the transaction because they probably bought it for cheap because it's like this ugly turd that you bought out there or that they bought for really cheap, and then they renovated it and then they're getting their money back by selling it to you. And that's just fine because you want it rent ready. So if you're looking at turnkey real estate investments, be sure you're going to someone who's got one, a great reputation, and then two, it's actually rent ready. And there's not all these unseen costs and things like that involved too. And then three, you want to make sure they're also very good property managers. Do they actually honor their word? Do they have good reviews? Those kind of things. Because if they don't, or if they give you bad tenants, I'll tell you, that's when you go from being a passive investor to an active investor. Is if all of a sudden you have to babysit the property management company, if you have to go and take it over and fire them and all that kind of stuff, it gets ugly, especially if you expect it to be hands-off. So just be aware that specifically with turnkey real estate, which is kind of semi-passive anyways, be sure that you're getting a good, reputable turnkey company to help you with that. Now there's other ways you can be passive as well. You could be lending your money out to other investors. You can lend the money for them, whether they're doing the projects on the fix and flips, whether they're trying to buy into a project. It could be actually to buy an apartment building, but rather than making you an equity investor, they make you a debt investor. Or it could be equity. It could be either, right? Syndications, where people pool their money together, is a good example. There are debt funds, where a lot of times they're just raising capital, paying you an X% interest to them and all their investors, or to their, really, the creditors, right? You're like the bank in this case, because you're lending them the money. They might be paying a lot of money to that, and then they have those funds to use in whatever projects they want. They keep the equity and the growth, they keep everything else, they just pay you the returns. I have a friend that does that in New Jersey. He goes and does fix and flips in New Jersey, but then also buys apartments like in Atlanta and places like that. And so he just has a simple debt fund you put your money in, pays you anywhere from like 10 to 12%. Now, that being said, this is the critical key if you want to become a passive real estate investor in this space. You need to do your research on them, their finances, and their deals. So you have to do your research. Now, easy way to do research, of course, Google is not a bad way to go. Even when, I get asked by our clients all the time, they're like, hey, have you heard of this company or this group or this group? The first thing I do is I go and I look at try to find their website. I go try to find out more about them. I also will Google, like, if there's bad reviews, or you put in the name of that company and scam or something like that, or that company reviews. Start to look at it to see what's out there. Now, I don't buy everything that's on the internet, every critical comment or something out there. But if I see a very big trend and it's kind of commonly known among those people in their circles that don't like them, I would probably hesitate to get in with that group, especially if I'm looking at them. Now, I'll also go to their website. I'll look at their about page. Do I know their partners? Do I know who they are? Because I'll tell you, it's more about the who than the what they're investing in, right? It's who's doing the investing versus the what. Everybody can promise the moon and the stars when it comes to real estate investments and how much money you can make, all that kind of stuff. But the real truth is, I want to make sure I get return of my money, not just return on my money. Meaning, I want to make sure that my money will come back to me, that I'm not going to lose it. I don't care about what kind of returns they'll promise me if it means that I could lose all my money. And granted, anything has risk. You can lose your money at any time. But I like to minimize our risk as little as I can so that I can ensure that I can sleep peacefully at night with my money in those investments. So I look at who's actually the owners. Recently, I actually had somebody that sent me this group and they said, hey, it looks like they got a lot of attention. Seems like they're getting pretty popular. When I looked at the founders, I said, well, look at this. They've only been around since 2019. Well, that's 5 years. Yeah, they might have gone through a couple years of some hardships or whatever it might be, but do they really have a full market cycle? Have they really been around for at least 12 or 15 years? And the truth is, they only had one person on their team that had a little bit of that kind of experience, but it was in a different kind of real estate. It wasn't the kind that they're doing. So here's the other warning. I'll give you this a bonus tip, is that all of a sudden you see someone that says, hey, I'm investing in apartments, but their expertise was in single family homes. Well, that doesn't count. They're two very different animals. Or if they were in apartments before, but now they're doing self-storage, well, that's almost like the clock resets. Like they are really just as if they're brand new. Granted, they might know a few more things about real estate in general, but that specific kind of real estate strategy, they don't know much about. Even sometimes if they've done it for a while, if it's a different strategy than what they're used to, it can be dangerous. For example, I had a friend that did stuff with assisted living. And granted, he found a few really good ones that he did, very boutique type of assisted living. And he would convert old properties, usually ones that were very large, kind of rambler type homes, and then you convert those into a very small assisted living facility. And he did a wonderful job with that. But then a few years into it, he said, you know what, I'm finding a hard time trying to do this and then renovate the properties. What if I just did new construction? What if I just built them the way I want them? Well, when he started to do that, both myself and a few other friends said, listen, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like if you understand how to do what you've already done, don't just go do new construction. Don't try to learn how to rezone everything and all that stuff. That's other variables that you don't understand. He did it anyways, and he ended up losing investors' money. And so that's one big warning you got to be aware of, is that you don't want to do that. I had another friend that, he's talking about doing vanilla real estate deals, but then he ran out of the vanilla deals. He was very good at doing specific types of apartment buildings. And then he said, I'm going to start bringing out the chocolate deals. And so he started doing hotel conversions and all this stuff, in hot markets that he'd never been in before. And as a result, almost every one of these deals tanked. Just about every one. So you got to be aware that when you're looking at these people and looking at their expertise and experience, one, how long they've been doing it, two, have they been doing it in the same arena, and then three, is the investment you're looking at still in their wheelhouse? If it's not in their specialty, their wheelhouse, then I would just not do it. I had somebody that came to me who was a real estate investor saying, hey, I'm getting into the oil and gas space. Here's this great technology. And I said, great, come back to me in about 10 or 12 years, and then let's talk and see how you're doing then. And lo and behold, a few years later, the whole thing went belly up, right? So you got to be so careful. If you want to be a passive investor, you need to be aware that you could lose your money at any point, and especially if that operator isn't doing a good job or isn't that well experienced. Now, another little bonus thing to look at too, if you can get their finances, understand their finances, are they liquid with cash? How is that? Do they put their own money in the investments? Is a big, big one, because you want to know that their own personal money is at risk every time. If they're just putting your money in, then they get paid guaranteed management fees. They're no different than being a financial advisor. They're just putting your money in. They're getting paid whether you make money or not. That to me is not really acceptable. I know that some will choose to do that, but I like to know that they got their own money in, or they got their mom's money in, their parents' money in. They know that that money is sacred to them, that they do not want to lose it. Now, there's a lot of other things you could do too, of course, to research on these people, but it's about developing and building those relationships. So when you're being a passive investor, you need to be careful with your money and ensure that you are a wise steward with it. And that does require a lot of upfront research and things like that. Now, you could do like what some of our clients have done. They borrow our network because we've done the research. Now, it doesn't mean that everything's guaranteed, right? It does mean that sometimes they do good deals, but they could change it. So that's why you got to learn how to do due diligence first, and then you can either create your own network and spend years doing that, or you borrow somebody else's network who's also done their own research too, and then you can kind of save yourself some time trying to waste all that time trying to find some people out there by Googling or whatever you try to do, or listen to podcasts. That's not always the best way. By the way, I have people on my podcast that I wouldn't put money with. It doesn't mean that they're bad people. It just means that they've got a good story, and maybe they're story worthy on my podcast, but maybe they're not people that I would trust my own money with. So just be aware of that. Is that you've got to be very, very careful about who's being endorsed and why. Oh, bonus, also do not trust people that try to broker you, so to speak, like people that get paid by referring you to other investments. That's why we never take money from those investment operators, because we don't want to be incentivized to try to get somebody into a deal. We want to be much more hands-off. So those are the kind of things I would look at when you're looking. I mean, there's so many more questions you could look at too, but those are a great start. If you do this, 95% of the deals, you'll find out most of them won't pass your filter test anyways. But then on top of that, you'll probably realize that you'll feel and sleep much safer at night, knowing you've done the right research to become a real passive real estate investor. Now, if you're curious to see how much passive income could you create in your own situation, what's possible, are there other opportunities out there? Go to our website, moneyripples.com. There's a passive income calculator you could try to see, one, how much passive income you can create in your situation, and then two, are there ways or people that you could be connected to that actually help you be able to make this work? So go check that out today at moneyripples.com.